Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me, ma?
Yes, good afternoon. But my video can't come up. You disable.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairperson.
Good afternoon, sweetheart. I said you disabled my video.
No. I think there's someone from Secretariat. LPILP, are you there, please?
Okay, it's disabled now.
Okay,
It's
all
okay
right.
now.
Okay.
I'm sure you can see me now.
Yes, I can see you. I can see Dr. Da Silva too. Very lovely backgrounds. So we're waiting for Dr. Akiode and Kemi Bonola from Bolanis to join us. So I think we have 2 minutes more. How do we start at 2 o'clock on the dot? Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it depends on when we look at the number of people in attendance, we can give some minutes of grace, or
Okay.
you can also start. It depends on you. You are our moderator for today.
Okay, ma. No problem. I'll try and reach out to Dr. Akiode. I'll reach out to her now, and Kemi as well.
In the meantime, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. Good afternoon, Mrs. Energy. My name is Kemi Da Silva Ibru. I'm not sure if you can hear.
Chairperson, did you hear her?
I don't believe she can.
I heard her faintly. Faintly.
Do you want to repeat that, Dr. K?
Sure. Mrs. Energy, can you hear me now? Is it louder?
Yes, sweetheart. Good afternoon, ma.
Good afternoon. I thought it would be a good opportunity to introduce ourselves since we're waiting on others. I said, my name's Kemi Da Silva Ibru, and it's a pleasure meeting you.
It's a pleasure too. My name is Philomena Neji.
Nice to meet you.
Phil
With
Neji,
more information
Lagos.
about the very distinguished
I'm the founder of the Women at International
Mrs.
Foundation.
Philomena Energy.
Okay, what is?
Yes.
She's a legal practitioner,
All right.
Lagos chairperson, International Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA. Mrs. Energy is passionate about protecting the rights of women and children. She has worked tirelessly in this field with local and international organizations. To provide you with more information about the very distinguished speaker, Mrs. Philomena Energy. She's a legal practitioner, Lagos chairperson, International Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA. Mrs. Energy is passionate about protecting the rights of women and children. She has worked tirelessly in this field with local and international organizations.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'ams. My name is Kemi Bonola. It's so nice to meet you, even though it's virtual.
Pleasure is mine.
I've heard about the work that you're both doing, so I'm quite elated to be on the same panel with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kemi, because I'm also Kemi, as I'm sure you know.
Yes, yay. Namesakes. Yes, so just mute this.
Okay, Dr. Achiode.
Dr. Anita Kemi da Silva Ibru is a specialist obstetrician and gynecologist with a medical background that extends to public health. She is also a public health physician and an academician who is currently undergoing a PhD in gender-based violence. As a qualified physician with over 15 years experience in private practice, she dedicates her time addressing the needs of girls and women. Dr. Da Silva is also the founder of Women at Risk International Foundation, WARIF, a nonprofit organization that successfully tackles the issues of gender-based violence, rape, and trafficking of young girls and women in communities across Nigeria. Dr. Da Silva graduated from the College of Medicine, University of Lagos, and completed her postgraduate training in obstetrics and gynecology at Howard University, Washington, D.C. She received her master's degree in public health from the Bloomberg School of Public Health, Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore, Maryland. She has expanded her expertise beyond the field of obstetrics and gynecology with her participation in postgraduate medical courses in various specialties, and is an alumnus of the Lagos Business School, Pan Atlantic University, Lagos. Dr. Da Silva is currently enrolled in a PhD program in gender-based violence, public health and policy at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the United Kingdom. She is a member of the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria, the American Medical Association, the American Public Health Association, Medical Women Association of Nigeria, the Association of Public Health Physicians, Nigeria, and the Faculty of Public Health, United Kingdom. She is also a member of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria. Notable awards and recognition include WIMBY's Top 100 Most Influential Women in 2017, Leading Ladies Africa, among others. Dr. Da Silva is a strong advocate of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, and is known for her unmitigated passion for women's rights, which has shaped her life and has led to her establishing WARIF. She believes that it is our primary social responsibility to ensure that globally, all young girls and women live in a society free of rape and sexual violence. To provide you with a little more information about the very distinguished and experienced speakers who are very knowledgeable in this field. Dr. Abiola Akiyode Afolabi is the founding director of Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center, WARDC. She's a legal practitioner and civil rights activist, a lecturer of humanitarian law at the University of Lagos, and an international consultant. Dr. Akiyode Afolabi studied law at the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. She received an LLM from the Notre Dame School of Law in the United States and a PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, at the University of London, where she specialized in women's peace and security studies. In 2002, she established the Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center, WARDC, a not-for-profit organization focused on maternal and reproductive health advocacy, gender-based violence, and social justice. She is on the board of West Africa Network for Peace Building and the Nigerian Women's Trust Fund, WANEP. WANEP is a regional peace-building organization established in 1998 in response to civil wars in West Africa. While Women's Trust Fund was founded to address the problem of underrepresentation of women in governance and gender inequality. More generally, Dr. Akiyode Afolabi also teaches international humanitarian law. Thank you. Mrs. Titilola Vivo Adeniyi is a legal practitioner and a public administrator with over 10 years in public service. She has served in different capacities within the Lagos State government during this period. She has been instrumental in ensuring a coordinated response to sexual and gender-based violence in Lagos State. She currently serves as the pioneer coordinator of the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Team. She was appointed the pioneer coordinator of the DSVRT in 2014. Since her appointment, she has facilitated the ratification of 2 landmark executive orders by the governor of Lagos State, the Sex Offenders Register and mandated reporting, as well as the Lagos State Safeguarding and Child Protection Program. Additionally, she was actively involved in drafting of policy documents and manuals on investigating and prosecuting domestic violence, mandated reporters manual, safeguarding the rights of a child, and other awareness process documents on handling of child abuse, domestic violence, and rape, which have been useful in creating awareness and sensitizing members of the public. Ms. Vivo Adeniyi has earned the title Merchant of Hope. Kemi Bono is a 21st century legal practitioner with a rich practice experience of over 13 years. She is an alumna of Obafemi Awolowo University, where she obtained an LLB, graduating in the top percentile of her set before being called to the bar in 2008. She has a bias for matrimonial causes. She has won several custody and maintenance battles. She is an associate partner at Wall and Ace Legal Practitioners, where she heads the family law department. In partnership with the Public Interest Law Partnership, she has actively advocated for the need for justice to indigent citizens and has over the years led the firm's team to achieve this lofty goal. She is a member of the Nigerian Bar Association, as well as the Nigerian Chartered Institute of Management. She is a certified mediator from the Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse and is currently running a master's degree in law at the University of Lagos. In her spare time, she writes poetry and has written several poems on feminism, gender inequality, and domestic violence in the society, with several awards in recognition of their relevance. Please follow Ms. Bonuola on Instagram at Kemi Bonuola, at Therapy Through Poetry, Facebook, Kemi Bonuola, Twitter, We're the Arts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for that, for the introduction. So I think we'll go straight away into the topic of our conversation today. You would agree with me that the panelists are very, very experienced. Some of us here have, some panelists, some members of the panel have been doing this for over 2 decades. So this is an area that we're very, very conversant and comfortable with. So we'll be speaking today about access to justice for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. Access to justice. We are not oblivious of the fact that most of these vices, be it rape, defilement, domestic violence, these are criminal allegations. These are crimes against the state. And so it's important for us as first responders, as NGOs, non-governmental organizations, as legal practitioners, to ensure that we're able to ensure that survivors are able to access justice. So we'll be looking at this from different perspectives, and I would like to start with the chairperson of FIDA Lagos, Mrs. Ineji. Mrs. Ineji, as the chairperson of FIDA, we rely very, very heavily on the services that FIDA provides for survivors of domestic violence and for survivors of sexual violence. So what would you say are some of the legal rights of survivors of domestic and sexual violence? That will help us to start this conversation. What are some of the legal rights? What are the rights that we should, as responders, ensure that we're able to enforce for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence? Please unmute your mic, ma.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Lola. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to appreciate the organizers of the program for this, your Pro Bono Week. It is a very laudable one. Coming to your question, there is no gainsaying that survivors of sexual and gender-based violence are subjected to devastating emotional and psychological effects. These effects can be to some extent cushioned and addressed, not just by recognizing that they have legal rights, but also by ensuring that they get justice without undue delay. Protection of fundamental human rights is very important. However, the rights can only be adequately guaranteed and protected through enhanced access to justice. Interestingly, access to justice is a basic principle of the rule of law, which emphasizes the rights to equal access to justice for all, including the vulnerable and indigent members of the society, especially women, children, and persons living with disabilities. In other words, for sustainable legal assistance to survivors, fairness, equality, equity, transparency, non-discriminatory, effective, and accountable service delivery that promotes access to justice must be institutionalized. Some of the legal rights available to survivors are, but they are not limited to this though. Right to justice, of course, the one we are talking about. Right to be heard, that's fair hearing. Right to dignity, right to privacy, right to legal representation, right to life, right to non-discrimination, right to be compensated under civil claim, etc. We have a lot of them. All these rights are enshrined under the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria as amended. They are also encapsulated under some international and local legal instruments. We have our Constitution, which I mentioned before. Our Constitution is our grand norm. Under the Chapter 4 of the Constitution, we have all these rights provided for. We also have the one when we are talking about the international aspect, the CEDAW, Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1984, Criminal Law of Lagos State. We also have the VAP Act at the federal level that is applicable to the FCT, which we are also clamoring that all the states of the Federation should adopt. Then under the Lagos State, we have Protection Against Domestic Violence Law of Lagos State 2007. The year here shows that Lagos State has been proactively responsive in the area of the law, though we are also appealing that they should still identify some gaps that are in this law and also make it to be more encompassing. For instance, in the section 15 of the law, which is the punishment section, they need to look at the issue of the punishment provided for them. There's need for them to improve upon that. We also have Administration of Criminal Justice Law of Lagos State. At the federal level, we have the ACJA, Administration of Criminal Justice Act. It is not just enough that we have all these laws in place. Rather, we should look into the fact that it is very, very important for us to be able to institutionalize, enhance enforcement mechanism, and also ensure effective implementation of all these relevant laws. Then the pertinent question is, who are those saddled with the responsibility to ensure that legal rights of survivors are protected as supposed? We can now talk about the actors, relevant stakeholders. Here we can talk about the police, because the police are the ones to arrest, detain, investigate, prosecute, and secure conviction with respect to the perpetrators. We also have the bar, who are also supposed to be at the forefront to represent. We also talk about the judiciary bench, the Ministry of Justice. Under here we have DPP, OPD, The CSOs we also have to come in place here, and NGOs like FIDA. We also have to remember the Legal Aid Council. They also have a part to play here. All these stakeholders are supposed to rise up to the expectation to ensure that survivors have access to justice. It behoves all of them to ensure that survivors of sexual and gender-based violence have access to justice, like I've said. In fact, it is a collective responsibility and requires a holistic, pragmatic approach. Moreover, the importance of effective implementation of administration of criminal justice system cannot be overemphasized. It is very, very key because it has a nexus in this regard with respect to access to justice. It was on this premise last year that FIDA made a strategic move in partnership with MacArthur Foundation and trained the bar, the bench, the police and correctional services. We also have simplified and translated Agile, that is Administration of Criminal Justice Law of Lagos State, into Pidgin English and Yoruba language for members of the public to be able to comprehend easily. We have also trained CSOs, NGOs under this particular issue we are talking about here today. And we have trained a lot of paralegals in different parts of Lagos. For instance, we have trained paralegals at Ikorodu community, Alimosho, Yaba, Ikeja, Ojodu, etc. All these geared towards ending violence and to ensure enhanced access to justice for survivors. Now, we can more or less ask the question with respect to our experiences concerning rendering legal services to survivors. We in FIDA are very passionate about women and children, and we have zero tolerance with respect to sexual and gender-based violence because it is an anachronistic and barbaric. On this, we offer pro bono services, and we have really had nasty experience in this direction. Yes, nasty experience. As female lawyers, we take a stand in ensuring that justice is served to our vulnerable population in Nigeria in general, and in Lagos in particular. Why rendering services to survivors? Because we usually hold legal clinics every week, and on Thursdays, to be precise. We have noticed that the culture of silence and impunity has really weighed a lot of survivors down. You see most of them coming to us with being in a very terrible state of hopelessness. And this problem has to do with the fact of what they have been able to experience with respect to access to justice. But why rendering services to them? We usually pay attention or put into consideration the principle of gender-based violence, which has to do with respect, confidentiality, safety, security of the survivors, and non-discrimination, and so many other factors that we put into consideration. We have also observed that several indicators are barriers to access to justice with respect to survivors. The barriers include not limited to long delays, prohibitive cost of using the justice system, lack of available and affordable legal representation that is reliable and that has integrity, cultural pressure on the side of families, and we know that we have our patriarchal, we live in patriarchal society. So all these things tend to be pressurizing survivors to settle out of court. And we are all aware that sexual and gender-based violence is a criminal act, is a heinous crime. So it's not something we should be talking about settlement. And then the police has always been one of the problems too. Most times they compromise a lot, and their attitude towards the survivors are not very encouraging at all. And on that area, we think we need to really talk about having effective policing and also training the police so that they will know that they have a lot to do. Most times, the way they handle the issue of the cases that go to court is rather very worrisome. Another indicator is also the fact that most times they are afraid of the cost implications, the negativity on the part of the relations, if it has to do with family matters. The way they view it when they come to visit NGOs or report to the police is always very, very discouraging to the survivors. There are also problems with respect to insufficient evidence to support court proceedings, abuse of authority and powers resulting in denial of justice. All this put together keeps on hitting survivors in a very bad manner. The legal rights of survivors of sexual and gender-based violence should be adequately protected. The true test of justice in a society lies not on the number of people with access to justice, but on the many who have little or no access to justice due to their vulnerabilities. It is therefore a desideratum for us all to ensure that justice is secured expeditiously for survivors. The absence of access to justice means that people are unable to have their voices heard, compensated, unable to exercise their rights to challenge discrimination, hold decision makers accountable for non-protection against future occurrence. And while we are handling our cases, we do a lot of referrals. We do referrals to other NGOs with respect to psychosocial support. And under that particular instance, we collaborate a lot with Mirabel Center. And we also work closely with Domestic Violence Rapid Response Team of Lagos State, as well as the OC level of the police. Longer, she has always been doing a lot with respect to all these issues. In conclusion, we are of the view that the fact that we have laws is not enough. We have to look for a way to make sure that the rights of survivors are well protected. And that is by making sure that all cases are followed to a logical conclusion. We should be able to be talking about how many people that have been prosecuted and sentenced. And the issue of the provision of the law concerning the number of imprisonment under this kind of heinous crime. But then we have little conviction as far as we are concerned. And the sex offenders register should also be made very functional so as to act as a deterrent with respect to perpetrators. All this, when we look at them, we always realize that justice to anyone is justice everywhere. And justice delayed is justice denied. So we should all join hands to support access to justice with respect to survivors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Neji. Thank you for not just highlighting the problems, but also preferring solutions to the issues. Thank you for highlighting the different rights of survivors: right to be heard, right to dignity, right to privacy. Yes, when we attend to these clients, they have a right to be heard, to be attended to, apart from us being professionals, but we also have to show empathy. Survivors need to be believed. They need to know that, they are not making up these cases in their minds. It's not in their head. They have a right to be heard. Thank you so much for highlighting their rights. And also thank you for highlighting the issues that, affect survivors on their road in accessing justice, long delays in court, the culture of impunity, the delays it takes in getting, in securing a judgment in court. These are some of the issues that affect survivors in accessing justice. So I'll go to Dr. Da Silva now. Dr. Da Silva, as she's been introduced, is the founder of Women at Risk International Foundation, WARF. WARF is a sexual assault referral center that provides sexual assault management services to survivors of sexual violence, provide head-to-toe forensic medical examination, and also psychosocial support for the survivors. So ensure that survivors are able to receive holistic care. Dr. Da Silva, you've been doing this since 2016. And doing this, I mean, you founded WARF in 2016. What has been your experience in providing medical and psychosocial support for survivors of sexual abuse?
Well, let me start by saying good afternoon to everyone, both the panelists and of course you, Lola, and to all the attendees. I would like to commend the conveners, PILP, in their Pro Bono Week. And I think this is a particularly important aspect of the conversation in the context of gender-based violence. With regards to your question, Lola, as you rightly said, I started the WARF organization in 2016. However, I've been working in this space for almost 15 years now. And to put things in context, I think it's always important for us to appreciate exactly what we're talking about. We spend a lot of time here and elsewhere discussing survivors, but then we never really talk about this on the magnitude of the problem that we're addressing. We're all very much aware of the fact that we're a large country, about 200 million people. We know half of us are women. We know we're young, so we know 60% of us are under 24. Statistics like the 1 in 4 girls before the age of 18, 1 in 14 girls and women between 15 and 49 experiencing one sexual violence encounter, and over half of them experiencing more, is one that we're all familiar with. The characteristics of our survivors, we all know there isn't a particular criteria. We have the young and the old. At the WARF Rape Crisis Center, which is a sexual assault referral center under the organization's health pillar, we run free services for all survivors. Sadly, the youngest that we've had to attend to is under the age of 2, and the oldest is now in her late 60s. Of the 2,200 beneficiaries since we opened in 2016, 70% are under the age of 18. And now this is not surprising because, as we rightly said, these are the vulnerable group and the largest demography in our country. The characteristics of religious affiliation, there isn't any. The characteristics of education achievement, there isn't any. And then socioeconomic classes, all girls and women, sadly, can be a survivor. When you look at the perpetrator at the WARF Center, 90% of them are well known to their survivors. They're the fathers, the uncles, the caregivers, and they're placed in homes and schools, places that are considered safe, and unfortunately are the places of risk. So again, this is a narrative that we're all familiar with. So when they visit the WARF Center, the free services are assured, but the most important thing to remember is that it's a safe haven, because this is what this woman or girl had endured. We offer services 7 days a week. However, the most important and pressing thing, if I say nothing else, is the timing of when these services are to be offered. In a medical setting, especially with a survivor of rape or sexual violence, it is critical that we see her within a 72-hour period from the incident. The reason being because of the forensic specimens that can be retrieved under the forensic medical examination that are carried out by qualified staff at the center. We always insist that girls and women please come unbathed or unshowered, so that again, it will maximize our opportunity of retrieving these specimens. And this speaks to the very heart of this particular webinar, the access to justice. For us to retrieve the specimen, we're fortunate enough that we have a DNA lab that we can send it to. And if it's matched successfully with an alleged assailant, then this can lead to these conviction rates and can lead to the successful apprehension that we speak of. The other services at the center include the medical treatment, of course, the cuts and bruises and the physical injuries, the HIV and pregnancy tests. Many of these encounters are unprotected. And then, of course, the post-exposure drugs that you should give, including preventing the transfer of HIV and unwanted pregnancies. Again, that window of 72 hours is critical to be able to administer these drugs in that timely fashion. Another equally important aspect is the psychosocial counseling. Many girls and women that have endured these horrific encounters are not allowed to speak out. Our community is not an enabling one. Families are more concerned with the hypocrisy of the family name than allowing her to seek justice, to seek services. And so when she's able to, it is important for her to be able to get the very needed psychosocial counseling. At the center, we offer individual counseling first to establish, is she at risk to herself or even to others? And then thereafter, a group counseling session with like-minded, young and old, who have experienced similar and therefore are able to engage and understand the pressure and the issues that she's enduring. I must say that there has been a marked success in our group counseling sessions since we've started them. With the COVID pandemic, a lot of us have had to pivot and work remotely. And therefore, we also noted, as many of us in this space have, an increase in the number of domestic and sexual violence cases. And the shadow pandemic was recorded at the center with a 64% increase in the call rates made during the first lockdown, and 72% of them were women trapped at home with their abusers. In response to this, we've started a virtual counseling session, ensuring that the psychosocial counseling needs are met, in spite of the fact that many of these women cannot make it into the facility. Unfortunately, these are usually offered in urban centers because of the necessary need of Wi-Fi. In recognizing this in the more rural settings, we've implemented community-based initiatives to address that particular issue with women that do not have access to Wi-Fi. I think at this point in time, with regards to the medical and psychosocial counseling that's needed, it's also important to emphasize the need to offer social welfare. And this is something that we felt was extremely important because we know that Nigeria is not a welfare country. And unfortunately, women don't have access to these services until they meet either organizations like FIDA, related agencies like DSVRT, or perhaps somebody that at that point in time might be exposed enough or aware enough to offer the assistance. So it is very important, it is a collective responsibility that all of us recognize the need at this point in time to offer her medical, her psychosocial, and certainly in the social welfare arena, accommodation, because many a time home is a place of risk, and definitely legal aid. And this is where, again, collaborations and partnerships with organizations like FIDA, being a proud member of DSVRT and affiliations with OPD and other law firms that are able to offer services. I'm sure Kemi can speak more on that later, is necessary to ensure that every girl and woman has not just access to medical services, but access to legal justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. K. Can I just ask a follow-up question to that, please? What are some of the challenges you know that you've experienced as an institution in ensuring justice for survivors? And it would be nice if you could amplify the challenges you experienced, particularly during COVID.
Right.
During COVID lockdown. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lola. I would say, firstly, the problem of gender-based violence is multifaceted. And so lies the challenges that we face, not just in accessing justice, but in addressing the issue at large. At the Warrior Center, 78% of our survivors end up recanting their stories following the initial wish to seek justice, and in spite of the fact that they've been provided with free legal aid. The fundamental reason, many a time, is the role that the family and community play. As intimated by Mrs. Neji, we are in a patriarchal country, Nigeria. It's deeply entrenched in a lot of cultural practices that encourages male dominance and the subjugation of women. And because gender-based violence is a systemic problem, there is a rape culture that has allowed these acts to become permissible. So communities are stenched in this stigmatization, there's lack of awareness. And so families are more worried about how will this look if such and such hears that this happened to my child. The burden of proof is now placed on the shoulders of this poor survivor. And as I stated earlier, 99% of the time, the perpetrator is at home. And so again, in trying to protect the false integrity of the perpetrator, this poor young girl is not supported and is certainly not believed, and she does not have the necessary platform to speak out. And so this leads to an inadequate access to necessary services because she's not even allowed to seek the services. Another challenge that we have is inadequate funding and resources. Many of us as NGOs rely solely on donor funding. Unfortunately, donor funding is a challenge for anybody in this particular philanthropic space. In addition to our space, even actors, other actors in the gender-based space, law enforcement, for example, we all heard of the challenges they would cite, say transportation or mobilization when it comes to effectively performing their duties. Another big challenge we have is training or lack thereof. A significant number of the women and girls seen at the Warrior Center are brought in or referred amidst police, if you will, cases. But however, there are still complaints about the way in which these cases have been managed. So law enforcement training, again, is another important aspect, and is one that we are actually looking at as we've started to train police officers, or rather encourage workshop in gender sensitization. Capacity building, I'm sure Lola, you will agree with me, family support units. Lagos is what, 22 million people? I believe we only have 12 or 13 of them. And these are specialized units that should be everywhere in ensuring not just seeking justice, but general security and protection of these girls. I think expanding the capacity building to medical, specialized sexual assault referral centers like WARF. There are only 2 or 3 in Lagos, for instance. And why don't we train other medical personnel? We have almost 100 primary healthcare centers. We can certainly train the personnel in forensic medical examinations, affording all girls the opportunity of seeking forensic services quickly and in multiple areas. And if you were to ask me, I would probably say finally, maybe ensuring cohesion of our laws. Because let's face it, when you move across Nigeria, you're moving from one century to the other. And different states rely on different penal codes and laws. And this hinders one's ability to receive fair and expected judgment across the board. So if we have a cohesive law across the country, such as the VAP Act, I suspect the lawyers on this platform may spend more time talking about this, then this would ensure that we're able to not only domesticate it across all states, but implement it. And then we would have one cohesive law that applies to all. And again, successfully achieve what we're all trying to, reducing the gender-based violence in our communities. Thank you, Lola.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for talking about the survivors of sexual and gender-based violence and the desire to access justice. The statistic one of the statistics that really resonated strongly with me is the fact that you said 78% of survivors at Warrior end up recanting their stories.
Yes.
I'm sure, I believe that it's not because they don't want justice.
Not at all.
It's because, as you've said to, there's so much pressure, societal pressure, family pressure, pressure from people that they may not even know.
Exactly.
What I mean by that is a landlord can call and try to appeal on his tenant's behalf, that just because the tenant resides in his house, he doesn't want the tenant to be prosecuted. So there's a lot of pressure on survivors. And that is why we have to always commend the survivors. Once they come out and speak up, it has taken a lot for them to summon that courage and seek help, especially from formal institutions. Thank you, Dr. K.
Thank you.
Dr. Lode, we've been speaking about survivors. We are responder agents. We are NGOs, government, legal practitioners. Well, in your view, Ma, what would you say is justice? What does justice mean for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence?
Well, let me also thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting, and also thank the PILP for this program. It's very important that we start looking at pro bono services, to further support the number of survivors that we have across the country. I want to thank those who had spoken before me, who work in the same field. So I want to adopt some of the things that they have said as very true and very correct. I doff my hat for Worry for the intervention that they make, for FIDA, for all the things that they have been doing across the country. Yes, what is access to justice? Access to justice is a very broad terminology, and for survivors, it means a whole lot of things. One, it's about effectiveness of enabling laws, and I think we need to ask ourselves that question: how effective are the laws that we have in Lagos State? Since we are coming back to Lagos, and I think that Dr. Kebi was talking about how the laws vary even across the country, but I'm coming back to Lagos. The vacuum, a whole lot of actors, so the prosecution system, is it effective enough, to be able to deliver those that we are talking about? Is it really effective and adequate?
Okay, doctor, are you back, Ma?
Yes, I'm back. I'm so sorry. My connection today, I don't know, has been incredible. This is the second Zoom, and it's been like this. So just quickly, so I was talking about the police system must also be effective in a manner that they must be able to respond, adequately to survivors, show the kind of empathy that I think someone had mentioned, so that it's not just responding to survival, but also ensuring that they show the necessary empathy. The prosecution, the issue of remedies and reparation, people also think that you want to go through all these processes. So at the end of the day, is it just about sending offenders to jail? So what happens, to the survivor? What are the response systems, that we have in terms of preparation, in terms of compensation, for the survivor? So it seems that there's a general assumption that what survivors want is the criminal justice prosecution, which is not always, the truth. So there are issues of physical and mental recovery that in terms of accessible healthcare system, that can respond to them. And this is not something that's a one-off thing. Trauma counseling takes a long time. So do we as a state, have that capacity to be able to deliver that, to be able to get justice? The mental recovery, somebody who has suffered rape has a whole lot of things to deal with, and it's not something that can be dealt with within a couple of days, So do we have that kind of system, that can bring that back to person to life, that can help in, bring back, some of the realities of life, So there are a whole lot of other things. So in summary, if you look at what we have, that we see as, yes, responses that we have been able to make. And I want to say, having worked for over 25 years in this field, I want to say that there has been a lot of development. WARIF came in 2016, and they are making giant strides. The domestic violence, they were not there in 2000, 2010. But when they came in, they have actually addressed a whole lot of that issue, problems that we have with respect to access to justice. But of course, because of the number of people that we have in Lagos, we are all trying to deal with 20 million people. So we still don't have that kind of support system. And the other issue that I've raised severally also is that there's no way we can deal with issues relating to violence against women or survivors of violence against women without having adequate resources, put in place. So as we still speak, there's this a problem of having adequate budgetary allocation, to support some of the needs of the survivors. And if we don't have that, then it becomes very problematic. From the civil society point of view, there's scarcity of funds. So we don't even also have enough to be able to respond to it. We are talking about sexual assault referral center, for example. I think we have about 3 or 4 in Lagos. Now, if we have just 4 and we're dealing with that number of people, I see the kind of number that the Domestic Violence Referral Center rolled out. This kind of number for us in my organization, we have over 450 people on a yearly basis that we have to go to court for. That is minus those that you speak to, that you counsel, so several other people that you have to go to court for and all of that. So there's a challenge of resources, which has also not made, the work of people who are working with survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. At times, and I am sure some of my other colleagues here would agree, you have to even use your own personal money to get people back to accommodation, to get accommodation for people, to get people back to life, so that they don't continue to suffer, violence, and so that what you have done in terms of reintegrating them back to the society will not be, lost. So these are some of the issues, and so we need to look at access to justice beyond the prosecutorial processes that we focus on. We need to look at it from the health point of view, the mental health point of view, and also compensation, and also letting the women get their lives back. And I think that's the most important. If you don't get your life back, there's actually no justice for it. It's like women who have been involved in conflict, and you come back and you say, stay in the IDP camp, and you are in the IDP camp for about 3-4 years. You haven't solved any problem. You have not addressed their needs. So that's a major issue. So for us in WOTC, one of the things that we try to do, if you look at the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law, one of the things that the law is trying to do is to go beyond the criminal prosecution and also a demand for compensation, and also for the society to build in an health system that can respond, to the need of the survivors. The Violence Against Persons Law has a presumption of a committee that is supposed to be handling this kind of thing, and also, monitoring to ensure that survivors get the needs that would really address their problem. So for Lagos, we have not gotten there. What we have is domestic violence law. So we've been doing a lot in terms of working with the parliament to ensure that they adopt the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law. And we feel that Lagos also needs to go beyond the domestic violence law, which, if time permits, it's also still defective, to be able to address the problem of domestic violence, to talk less of other problems that are related, which is not being handled. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you so much, Ma. So just to highlight a point you made, we need to go beyond, if I may put it this way, jailing perpetrators. Jailing, prosecuting perpetrators does not necessarily amount to justice for survivors. We need to look at it holistically. We need to become more survivor-centered, ensure they are able to receive medical attention, psychosocial support, empowerment, restore them back to where they were before the abuse occurred. Thank you very much, Doctor. Okay, so I'm coming now to Kemi, the last but definitely not the least. So Kemi, you are in the private sector. You're an associate partner at Wallace. We've noticed that some private legal practitioners are unwilling to provide pro bono legal services to indigent survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. In your view, why do you think that is so?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, once again. Thank you, Madam Lola. I'm really, really excited about this topic that we're taking today. And I'm so excited because I can see all these great women, strong women in the field. And I'm like, who am I, you know? But yes, straight to your question. Why is there unwillingness? In my opinion, I would have to say that it's not really about the fact that it's the indigent sexual and domestic violence survivors issue. It's not about that. I think it's about the general unwillingness that you would find from private legal practitioners, you know, giving pro bono services. Generally, there is that, I mean, nobody starts a law firm and, you know, thinks that they're going to start giving pro bono services. You start a law firm because you want to make money. It's for profit. So that unwillingness is a general thing. You're thinking, okay, my time, my resources, how am I going to manage that when I'm giving free services to indigent citizens? Now, particularly for sexual and gender-based violence, for example, you want to consider the time that you're going to spend on a particular case. So for example, if a case is referred to our firm, we sit down and we evaluate how long are we going to spend on this case? How serious or how seriously will it be taken? Don't forget, like every other speaker has said, every other panelist has said, there are so many other issues in the judicial system, and those issues affect the decisions that a private legal practitioner would make. For example, you're thinking, okay, if I take this case, will the police frustrate the matter? How long will it take for this matter to be charged to court? You know, so there are so many issues around that would make a legal practitioner, a private legal practitioner think and say, oh, should I take this case or not? So it really goes, for those who actually take cases like this, it's because they have looked at the benefits, not just to the firm now, I'm going to highlight that, but just the benefit in terms of why did we study law? Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we, you know, we want to help people. So it's kind of, for those of us who take this kind of cases, we're thinking about the reasons why we went to law school, why we studied law, why we want to do something, want to give back. So it's kind of like a corporate social responsibility. But that unwillingness will always be there because a law firm, a sole proprietor, a sole practitioner would think first that they need to consider their pockets. How much funding is going to be available? How many cases would you even take? That's an aside. There's also the situation of, you have survivors who do not give you enough facts. You don't have enough information. And so you begin to wonder, do you have enough to actually come up with a legal strategy that would actually help this survivor? Sometimes you find out that there's no readiness. And I know there are underlying issues around that, which have been pointed out by the panelists as well. The survivor might not be willing to give more facts because they're afraid, or, you know, there's pressure. I'm sure we'll probably talk about that later as well. So a law firm, say for example, sometimes the unwillingness is not even immediate. It may come afterwards. They might take the case and then they find out that this survivor is not really showing the seriousness that we want. But the truth of the matter is they need to remember that this is a very delicate situation. You need to handle them carefully. These are people, women who have been abused. So there needs to be that empathy on the part of the legal practitioner to say, oh, let me give this person some time to gather their thoughts together and all of that. But again, like I said, a legal practitioner is thinking about making money. So the time, the resources, that's like the major, for me, in my opinion, that's like the major thing that causes the unwillingness. There's also the aspect of perhaps ignorance. Now, ignorance in terms of, do people actually know, is there enough awareness that there are survivors out there that really, really need lawyers? This is Lagos. It's a commercial hub. A lot of lawyers, I don't have the statistics, a lot of lawyers are commercial practitioners. So again, tied back to making money. So this is Lagos State, and everybody, most of the lawyers are trying to, they're in the commercial space. Do they actually know that these people need them? Are they aware? Is there enough awareness for them to say, okay? And then I also discovered that there are some law firms that have a billing system. And so they have hours that is tied to the work that every lawyer does. So it's like you have a timesheet, and then you have to calculate all the hours that you spend on the work that you do. So then I think maybe the question we need to start to ask is, why should law firms take pro bono? Why should law firms actually take pro bono? Why should they be encouraged to take pro bono? Why should a law firm consider taking a pro bono case from the DVRST, for example, or the PILP? So if we are able to indicate the benefits to the law firm and then to the society, then that unwillingness might not be as bad. So for me, I'm going to highlight one or two. So for example, in our law firm, when we consider taking cases, we think, oh, we have some young lawyers here that need to learn. So you're talking about increasing their skill sets for, law practice. You also look at, oh, this is an area of practice that, so for example, for the commercial lawyers, they probably never treated a case that has to do with a survivor of sexual and gender-based violence. So it's an area that they can say, oh, I want to have some practice experience in this area. It might not be for a long time, but it adds to their practice experience. And so that might be another thing to highlight and say, okay, if you take this case, these are the things that you can benefit from. Also, you consider the goodwill. Sometimes you can go out there and you're like, oh, our law firm, we offer pro bono services in this and these areas. And the society would look at you like, oh, wow, you're doing your social corporate responsibility as a law firm. It's a professional responsibility that you give back to the society. So I think if we're able to indicate some of those benefits, and then just back to the fact that you're helping, there's a self-fulfillment that comes from giving that help to these people because they cannot afford it, then maybe law firms will be more willing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that's why we must commend the establishment of the public interest law partnership.
Absolutely.
They are there to encourage and promote the pro bono culture amongst our legal practitioners in the state. So yes. I don't know if you recall, Dr. Da Silva mentioned the fact that at least 70% of survivors eventually recount their stories. Yes. And I'm sure that you also had that experience where you're working with a client, you think you're on the same page, all of a sudden she comes back and says she's no longer interested in doing case. What would you say are some of the reasons why survivors, especially survivors of domestic violence, what are some of the reasons why they drop off the legal process?
Thank you, Madam Lola. I'm smiling because I have there's a case presently that's, it's been a very interesting one. I remember anytime we have to talk about it at our meetings, we're like, what do we do about this lady who keeps going back and forth? And then we had to bring on that empathy and think that, okay, maybe this person is going through, because of what she has experienced, mental health issues. You can never talk about the violence against a person without considering the trauma that comes with it. And so for me, that's the first thing. That's the first reason. the person can drop out of the legal process because she's not stable. You know, that mental stability is not there. Now I'm trying to, I don't want to use the word mental stability, you know, in a wide, just because of that experience. You, in intimate partner violence, you live in the same house with someone, the person attacks you over and over, you're able to take your leave, you actually leave the house. But then there's a struggle. So there's that struggle of, oh, what's the society going to think about me? What's my mother, my father going to say? You know, so there's that inner struggle. And that inner struggle is what causes the psychological trauma for the victim. And that's one of the reasons why they sometimes drop out of the process. It's not, you know, we can go further to say, okay, are they dropping out because the system is slow? That's another reason. Sometimes they're thinking, how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take? And we all know that this is something that we struggle with in Nigeria. So yes, there is that psychological trauma, which, you know, keeps troubling them. They're thinking, maybe I should go back. Maybe I should, especially if there are children involved. So the woman is thinking, who is going to take care of these children? And of course, these are indigent citizens, so she probably doesn't have something that she's doing. Maybe she has something, maybe she has a small trade, but it's not enough to take care of the child. And sometimes that's even a reason why there's domestic violence in the first place. So the man is using that as a weapon against her. And so she finds it difficult to continue with the process. And then she's thinking, maybe I should just manage the situation. We even have a situation where she goes back. She practically goes back to, you know, that situation. So let me just, you know, recap again. Number one, the psychological trauma. There's an inner struggle. She doesn't really know what to do, whether to continue with the process. Number two, the financial implications of the financial oppression from the husband, from the spouse. And then we even have a situation where there are threats. You know, she has left the place, but he sends her text messages. He could send her text messages and say, this is how you are going to be. I'm going to show you. Nobody's going to take you in. So there's fear. So there's that fear of, is this how my life is going to be? Who is going to take care of me? So everything is just tied into each other. And it really just comes back to the fact that she can't afford to take care of herself. And that's why most of the time we encourage these women to have something that they're doing so that they are not at the mercy of the spouse. Another thing is there's a high expectation of what is available at law, possibly because they don't know what the law really can give them. So, okay, so for example, for domestic violence, let's assume that the lady has children. So she's thinking, okay, since I've been able to leave the house now, I have 4 children or I have 5 children, I'm going to ask him for money. I need money for him to take care of the children, to take care of me. I need him to give me a house. You know, some high expectations come into the situation. And then at the back of her mind, she's probably thinking, and this goes back to what I think Dr. Akiode said about compensation. It's like at the back of her mind, it might not even be voiced out, but there's just something that's making her feel that if I get some money out of this situation, maybe I will feel better about what has happened. And I'm not really sure if that is because, I suppose it's because, you know, of the poverty that we have in Nigeria, because of the fact that, you know, this person who has been abused doesn't have a means to take care of herself. So she's thinking, okay, even though I've been able to leave, I'm not going to go without taking something with me. I think those are some of the reasons I can highlight. I would like to give some examples. I don't know if I have enough time, but yeah. Madam Lola, can I go on?
Okay, we can take, if you can quickly give the examples in 1 minute.
Okay, so I mean, it's just an example from one of the cases that we had some time ago. So this lady, we had started the process. She left the house. She was able to live with just one child out of about 3, I think. And she couldn't even live with her belongings. So we started the process of trying to get her belongings back, get a restraining order against the man, because the domestic violence was quite serious. And then to try and get the children out of the system. We got the order from the courts. The courts were very fast. You know, I mean, the courts, there are family courts in Lagos State. Kudos to Lagos State for all that, you know, is happening in the judicial system. So we got the order in a very short time. And then a few weeks or so, a few weeks after, she just comes back and she's like, I'm no longer interested. For a lawyer who has spent reasonable hours on that kind of pro bono service, you're like, what's happening here? Why are you not interested? I mean, we can see that there's been abuse. We can see how much it affected you. And we can see that we want you to take these children out of that situation. So why are you going back? And that brings us to the pressure that was spoken about earlier, family pressure. Now, she didn't voice it out. She didn't say, oh, it's because, you know, somebody's saying this or that, but she felt the need to go back. And she did. And we've not heard from her since then. And I really hope that she's fine. But it was very disheartening for me because I had taken her under my wing and, you know, there was that encouragement. I don't even know how Madame Lola does it, you know, with all the victims and all. She went back and it was just so disheartening. And I was very worried for a long time, just very concerned about the fact. So family pressure probably came in that situation, and maybe spousal pressure as well, because she didn't strike us as a strong-minded person. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I see Dr. Akiode's hand and Dr. Da Silva's hand, well, their virtual hands are up. You want to ask a question or you want to make an intervention? Dr. Da Silva? Oh, okay, Dr. Akiode, please go ahead, ma.
Yeah, well, I really want to make a comment on what she had said in terms of why would we keep having that, like 78% coming back. And I think she was able to raise some of the issues which we normally experience. Yeah, community acquiescence, telling her that, so what would you do after this? How are you going to cope? How are you going to survive? But you see, the truth of the matter is that at times it's always very important to also be very frank with your client about the likelihood of what is going to happen. If they beg an abusive husband, it doesn't stop him from doing that again. You know, it will probably repeat that. And by the time that is repeated, it tells you that you have nowhere to go. After all, you have exhausted all the places that, you know, you are supposed to go to. What we try to do right from the beginning is to have a deep conversation with the clients about what are the opportunities, what are the problems, what are the limitations. Unfortunately, the system is not very supportive of survivors of either domestic violence, you know, in terms of how many shelters do we have in Lagos, you know, and even if we have the shelter, what kind of care, you know, can we even give, you know, to people who come to that shelter? So it's really not like an opportunity that people want to, you know, step out for, you know, but it's always better to start with a deeper conversation for people to understand, so that even when they come back to say they want to make the decision, you let them understand the implication of that decision of not moving forward on that matter, you know, to even to get to a level where at least, you know, a judge comes up with like a warning. I remember that when the domestic violence law first came out, we used to call it a certificate, you know, because if you look at the domestic violence law, it's supposed to do both things. It's not entirely a criminal procedure. More or less, it's supposed to still keep the family intact, despite the fact that and that's why when you go to the family court, it's only you and the lawyer and the person. They don't allow other people to be part of it, So the man just get a restraint order. But we have had situations whereby when they get that restraint order, when they get home and they want to start quarreling, the man will call us and say, the woman has started again, come and warn her, that kind of thing, So it's, I think for me, it's about having a very deep conversation and letting them know that the man might be worse off, when they go back, into that relationship. It's a difficult conversation, but having that kind of conversation had helped, in some instances, and also trying to get in touch with organizations that can support. Maybe one of the reasons why the woman, for example, we had a woman whose husband was molesting their 5-year-old child, unfortunately fingers the child while they sleep on the same bed, so we have been taking the child to one hospital or the other for different reasons and all of that. Then one day the girl woke up and said, Daddy, I don't like what you did to me yesterday. And that was how the mother knew that this man was doing this to the child. Now, the woman came to our office and we said, we were so mad that we went immediately to go and arrest the man. She came back begging that she didn't want the man to be prosecuted. And when we found out why, it was because she came to Lagos with this man. She has no other person, that could help her to survive in Lagos. So there are economic justice issues. And that's why I'm saying that we must look at this issue from a very, holistic point of view. That woman that had come back to you, but had come back to you because she has nowhere else to go, and what she would need is that support. Until when we have those support system, built around survivors, that is when we can be able to address some of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. K.
I think very quickly, I'm just going to add to what Dr. Akiode said. But first, I want to highlight, certainly, Kemi, looking through the lens of a lawyer, I can appreciate the frustration and the challenges of investing time and, by that extension, funds into a case, only for a woman to turn around and say, I don't want to do this anymore. And many a time, you'd have built a relationship with her. And so therefore, through your lens, you cannot understand why she's saying, I don't want to do this any longer. I think it's very important to be mindful of labels. Women, yes, have challenges, and some women are fundamentally stronger than others. But when you talk about the psychosocial or the psychological trauma that women endure the trauma as a result of this event, this attack. Now, this attack, many a time, is sustained. It's very unusual that it's a one-off. And many of these women are coming from backgrounds and childhoods that they've been socialized in homes of violence. And so that is all they know. They respond to violence a little different to the exposed, strong, independent woman who has options. Her option is to implode, be quiet, be still, freeze, and wait for it to pass until it happens again. So when you talk about the inner struggles that she's dealing with inner struggles that is baggage that she brought into her adulthood. And then on a more practical level, she's dealing with a community that allows this to happen. She's dealing with family that would punitively cost her and probably prevent her from seeing her own children in spite of the fact that she is the survivor. Dr. Akiode gave an example of a woman that does not even have any assistance whatsoever. So I think it's very, very important for us to appreciate that, yes, women struggle. Yes, women come back. I mean, if you think that one case is enough to pull your hair out, I live it every day. And each time, remember, she's coming back with even more cuts and bruises. And each time she's bringing children that are even younger and younger. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of being able to say, this is not a pro bono case, so therefore we're no longer taking it, because we're mandated to protect all girls and women. So we all need to be mindful of this fact. It was just a little point I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Akiode, your hand is still up. I don't know if you want to make another intervention.
It should be down now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. So I think we will now open the floor for an interactive session. I don't know if we have any of our participants has a question, a comment to make, if you could please signify by raising up your hand, or you could please type it out in the chat box so that we can take these questions very quickly. I know that we're running out of time. Okay, so we have okay. In your experience, how much willingness from our leaders do you see in trying to eliminate this issue? So I think this is speaking to political will. Who would like to take this? It's not directed. Oh, can I use my file?
I can try.
Dr. Akyode, thank you.
I can try. Well, I don't think it has. Well, it has improved, but not very significantly. I think that our leaders are not putting their money where their mouth is. There seems to be a lot of commitment. I don't know whether you saw recently the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who had said that we cannot continue to have like a government where women are not, recognized and all of that. We keep hearing them, speaking about their commitment towards addressing gender-based violence. They have declared a state of emergency. It's never done before for all I know, for my 20 something years of work in this area, which ordinarily you would expect would have moved towards a whole lot of things. But after that declaration, we haven't really seen much in terms of progress. So I think that we still need to press for progress. We need to choose that as a challenge, to continue to insist that our leaders must act and do according to some of the things that they say. If you say you have declared state of emergency, we should have seen much more progress, particularly even in your budget. I think Lagos had a little bit increase in budget, but in terms of commitment, more investment in training, support for people who do the kind of work we're doing for survivors and all of that. But I don't think that there's much willingness from our leaders in that regard.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Da Silva, do you want to add to that, or Chairperson?
I would concur with, I'm sorry, am I on?
No, go ahead. Please go ahead, Doctor.
So I was just about to say, I do concur that the needle has shifted, albeit very, very little. I think we're having more conversation, which we all appreciate is always a good thing. But more importantly, where is all this conversation leading? I think we all would like that blueprint, those tangible solutions to be actually implemented. It's very nice that we have the committees. It's very nice that we have the policies. It's very nice that even the political lawmakers are coming forward finally to acknowledge that we have a problem. So we must acknowledge that this is a step in the right direction. We all saw last year, there was a state of emergency on rape. This had never happened. We're having conversations state by state, on state levels, on federal. But I think the time now is for us to all be very deliberate in not only having a roadmap, but actual implementation. If you ask any of us, we're able to give you a laundry list of all the areas that we feel is important, that we can all implement, make significant change, and improve this situation. So it's just a question of now implementing this laundry list, getting that roadmap. And this cannot be done without that political will, without that cohesive voice from our lawmakers. And I think fundamentally, that's all we're waiting on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Abiola Bonuola's hand is up. I don't know if the IT can unmute her for her to ask her question. I presume it's Abiola Bonuola. Okay, whilst we're waiting for that, we have another question from Emanuela Keshiro. What would you say is the overall biggest barrier to access to justice for victims of sexual violence? Would you say it is the lack of willingness of the victims to come forward? Mrs. Ineji, can you attempt that, please?
Okay. Looking at the experience we have had over the years, I think one of the highest challenges has to do with the societal pressure, cultural pressure, family pressure, okay? Making it difficult for them to be willing to come forth for these services to be rendered and follow to logical conclusion. Most of them are pressurized into compromising or backing out, like Kemi rightly identified or observed or stated. You're trying to help out and things are going on so well with respect to the case, and you're thinking that you're almost getting there to make your client very happy that justice has been, secured. And then you see that person backing out. So in most cases, we find out that it has to do with pressure, either from the community saying, please now, it has to do with your friend or it has to do with a relation. How do you want the society to look at this? Please let us just try and close up this case. And like I rightly pointed out, most times even the police tend to also chicken out, with style anyway, because they cannot be seen doing it in a way that it will be noticeable that they are compromising. I'm sure you understand what I mean. So this is one of the highest challenges. Then looking at the issue of whether they are also backing out because of the fact that they will be further stigmatized, deeper stigmatization, that the more they delay with respect to the case. That's why we're also looking at the justice system, whether they will be able to do something with respect to handling cases expeditiously and judiciously. Because the delay tends to make these survivors suffer the more. The stigma will now keep on going, the psychological effect and all that will keep on resurfacing. Because you see friends, you see people by the side, keep saying one or two things with that, now weigh that person down. That's why I said that at times in the legal clinic we conduct, you see so many of them coming up in a state of hopelessness. You're like trying to guide and counsel them that all seem not to be lost, all hopes are not lost. Try to gather yourself together and all that and all that. So those are some of the ones I feel that are most challenging because of our society, our culture. It really keeps on hitting back on the survivors. And instead of following cases to logical conclusion, they are backing out. And once they are backing out, you're more or less like left in a situation that we don't know how to go about it. You're pleading with them and they're not really coming forth. So the issue of even the financial support is another one anyway. But when we are talking about like from the area of FIDA, that we help them pro bono, handling their cases free of charge. So we cannot talk about the issue of the financial support now because we tend to file their cases without charging them any money, going to court for all these cases with our own sweat, our own time and energy. And then instead of that person now allowing you to finish up in a way that will make you to beat your chest and know that you are really giving it your best, you see them more or less backing out. So I pegged I pegged my own tent more on the issue of societal pressure, cultural pressure, family pressure, and all that. So
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ma. So we have a couple of questions on the Q&A chat. There's one, it's from an anonymous attendee. Do you think it might be a good idea for the media to start celebrating survivors to remove the stigma? If our panelists can please mute this question. Do you think it might be a good idea for the media to start celebrating survivors to remove the stigma? Another question from Tolu Lawal. In practice, has the enactment of laws like the VAP Act significantly helped to make prosecution of perpetrators of sexual violence easier? Or is there still a need for a legislation that is focused specifically on sexual violence? I believe you understand that question. Abiola Bonuola is asking, how much orientation is being done for men? Yes, because men can also be victims of or survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. If the society is patriarchal, how is PILP helping men understand these issues? So I think we can respond as far how is our institution helping men, and then PILP is on the call, they can also attend to that. Adolphus Nwachukwu, what can we do in sensitizing the person or family involved and the community at large on the need to address gender-based violence rather than covering it? So I think, if I may, the question about media, I don't know if Dr. Kemi can take that. The question about the effectiveness of the VAP Act, Dr. Akiode can take that. And then the orientation one, Kemi, I don't know if you're comfortable with that. Kemi can take that. And then the one about sensitization, anybody can attempt to go at that. So we'll start with the media one. Dr. K.
Thank you. With regards to celebrating survivors, we're in an environment where more and more we're seeing the positive as well as the negative impact of social media. And we appreciate that there is power in advocacy campaigns, in videos and information using the different platforms. So certainly, one is to highlight the positive strengths of a survivor using these same platforms. It is not a bad thing. We just always need to be mindful. We need to be mindful of the fact that it's a very fickle, queen, if you will, social media. We need to be mindful of the fact that it's not enough just to celebrate and highlight how well this survivor is doing, and of course, her bravery in coming forward. But it's also important to highlight that all of the assistance that she would need is available. It's important to highlight that no, her community won't come for her because of this celebration. And it's important to highlight that yes, the perpetrator will be apprehended. So yes, making sure that there are platforms, which is always one of the fundamental things that we push for in advocacy, so that a woman can come forward or a man who is a survivor to speak their truth is important. But it's also important, in addition to that, to go beyond and ensure that all other aspects are also highlighted on the same forum.
Thank you, Dr. K. Dr. Akiode, please, the question about the effectiveness of VAP. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, there are about 23 states that have passed the VAP law as we speak. Most of them passed in the last 3 years. Some of them have not really been effective. But I know that in 2013, the VAP law was passed even before the VAP Act in Ekiti State. So after, that was before the VAP Act. So, but it was called Gender-Based Violence Prohibition Law. It was called another name, but we were all involved in the advocacy for the VAP law. So it was more or less like the VAP law anyway. So they changed the name after 2015. I know, for example, that the evidence coming out from Ekiti shows clearly that the VAP law has been very effective in dealing with cases of sexual and gender-based violence. I don't know whether you have been following reports from that state. The sex offenders register, we have seen a lot of people advertised, in the state
who had committed rape and have been convicted, and all of that. So we've seen quite, a number coming out from that. So I think that it's not at the same level. Unfortunately, at the FCT level, where you would have expected, much more accomplishment, but I don't think that much has been done. But I would disagree that there's a need to have another sexual and gender-based violence law. The VAP law is very comprehensive, and if put in proper use, it can actually address all the issues that we are trying to respond to for survivors and also for offenders on sexual and gender-based violence.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, the question about orientation being done for men. Kemi, would you like to take that? Would you like to take that, or should I give that to?
I think that's for you, Madam Lola.
Okay,
maybe I can take it up just
Doctor,
quickly.
Please.
Yes, I know that, and I think my sister Kemi Warif will also confirm that. I think of recent with FIDA, there has been a lot of work with the Spotlight Initiative targeting a whole lot of men, and I know that Center LSD and some other organization actually focus on working with men, to end sexual and gender-based violence. And I think it's also something that is compulsory in the project of Spotlight for all of us to try as much as possible to involve men, youths, boys, in what we do. We have gotten to that level where we have understood that this issue cannot be solved by just women alone. It has to be solved collectively. It's a collective responsibility for all of us. So we must all have clear understanding of the dangers of sexual and gender-based violence. It's a developmental crisis, which we must deal with. We have had it's a very systemic thing. If we don't solve it, we will probably not be able to grow as a country. So everyone must be part of it. So I quite agree that there's a need for us to expand more. So maybe we are not focusing more enough, but there are processes to engage men. And we can all start from the home, engage the men.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Dr. K?
Yes, I can't agree more. I think for us to successfully tackle this issue, we have to include the boys and men. We have to include them in the conversation. We have to include them in the intervention. And we certainly have to include them if we're going to find any solvable solutions. At my organization, in recognition of this, we work with the most vulnerable, the adolescent young boys between the ages of 16 and 18, by ensuring programs are taken to secondary level schools. And these programs specifically target boys that are already sensitized in homes of violence, in environments of violence. So boys that are projected to become serial perpetrators because they don't know any better. And so you need interventions, you need programs such as we call the Boys Conversation Cafe to change that narrative at that critical age. And we have seen tangible, measured impact as a result of these programs across many secondary schools in Lagos State. With tertiary centers and tertiary institutions, like Dr. Akiode said, working with the UN Spotlight Initiative, we've been able to implement the first ever online classroom prevention of sexual campus violence across Nigeria. We had 3,000 students in our first cycle from 106 universities. These are young men and women, recognizing that these are issues that occur in their universities and certainly in their communities. So again, I cannot reiterate the importance of including men and boys in the conversation and ensuring that you have adequate interventions to address not just boys and men, but the specific group so that these interventions are age-appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so what can we do in sensitizing person or family involved and the community at large on the need to address gender-based violence rather than coping it? And we know the number of cases recorded are much less than what actually occurred. Based on your experience, by how much, please? Mrs. Neji, please, can you attempt those two questions now?
I can't even hear you very well. Can you come again?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I said a question is from Adolphus Nwachuku. What can we do in sensitizing the person or family involved and the community at large on the need to address gender-based sexual violence rather than covering it? And then we know the number of cases recorded are much less than what actually occurs. Based on your experience, by how much, please?
Well, a sustainable solution to this problem requires multi-sectoral approach. Like Dr. rightly said, it's a collective responsibility. We must all amplify our voices. And for us to be able to do that, to address the problem at the base level, we have to also look at the socio-economic and cultural factors. All this must be addressed. And like I rightly pointed out, that the survivors are always being pressurized from the angle of the family and the society. So for us to be able to address this, we require grassrooted massive awareness campaign. We need to really sensitize members of the public. And for us to do this sensitization and get it right, we have to go down to community leaders. Under FIDA, we have been able to do much in this regard, and we are still doing it anyway. Last year, we were in so many communities in Lagos State. Yes, to sensitize them, because so many of them are very, very ignorant of what it is all about. They don't even know the fact that incest, rape, name it, they are all heinous crimes, and you don't have to compromise. And that by the time you're keeping quiet, that same perpetrator might still go doing the same thing again. So we also were able to recognize and identify the fact that many families don't even educate their children enough with respect to the issue of incest. This one is a very big problem. We had a case whereby a relation impregnated the sister or the niece, sorry. So, I mean, it's a lot of issues. And that's where you now see them pressurizing the person. It's a family matter. Please don't do this, don't do that. So for us to be able to get results, and tangible one for that matter, we all have to go into massive awareness campaign to communities, involve the community leaders. By the time we are sensitizing them and making them to realize the fact that all these things are not just mere talks, it has to do with something serious. That when somebody commits rape or somebody commits incest, it has to do with the state. It is a crime between the state and the perpetrator. So you are now educating them, making them to understand why they don't have to pressurize somebody to compromise. We're also educating them on why they have to also, in town hall meetings, educate their people, make them to understand that they have not been doing enough. There is need for effective communication. So within the families, before we are now bringing them out to the society. So all this we need all to do, and make people to understand the problem of the survivors, and also the fact that we have laws, and that also they have rights. And it is only when you know you have rights that you'll be able to even start talking about how do I assess the angle or the area that will now help me to be able to protect my rights or to be able to get justice. So it requires massive awareness campaign, sensitization, and that's why we also appealing to the media. The media also, we need them. And when we are doing all this, we involve the media anyway, but we also have to pay for the media. We keep on appealing to them to please subsidy, try to do something that will not be so financial painful to us to be able to keep on going, because all these things we are doing for our society to be a better place, not just for us now, but for the future generation. So sensitization, the importance cannot be overemphasized. So we call them, at times you call families to sit them down. Yes, you need to talk. And that's why I say you go to communities, because some of them don't understand. And when you talk to them, really, you see that they are very, very ignorant of what we are all talking about here. And another way to sensitize them apart from going down to the communities is this. Let us always try to have the right audience. When we are organizing programs that has to do with sexual and gender-based violence, we should try to involve all the key stakeholders, the faith-based organization, the pastors in the churches, the mosques. All of them have a role to play. They will now take all these things back to their communities, and that's how we keep on expanding it. Then we also do schools outreach. We cannot also leave that one out, because these children, they need to understand what they're going into. Most times when we go for school sensitization, they don't even want their teachers to hear certain things that when you hear them, you'll be so baffled. They will script them in a piece of paper and say, please don't tell our teachers. And we also appreciate the fact that they're speaking out to us. But we're also teaching the teachers and parents and families to make children and the members of their families their best of friends, so that with them, they will communicate better. And with that, all these things we are talking about, we'll be able to, and we will be able to achieve a tangible result. If not, we just keep on making the noise and talking every time. So let us always have the right audience. When we are having programs, we should involve them. Our men, our boys, all of them should always be in most of these programs to hear all that we are saying, and there will be a voice. Some time ago, we trained some students in Unilab under gender-based violence. Yes, we had to go down there to train them, to talk about all these issues. And they were so happy to receive that training. Okay? We now told them to be a voice, to move out and do the same. By the time we're all doing this, something good will come out of it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lola.
Thank you so much, Ma. So we'll take the last question, and this will be to Kemi. This might be an unpopular question, but do you believe transgender females deserve the same protections under the Nigerian law?
Okay, it's really an unpopular question. Well, I mean, violence against the person is violence against the person. It doesn't have anything to do with sexual orientation or anything. So it's pretty straightforward for me. It's black and white. If there's violence against the person in the country, the VAP law should apply. And it's really just that simple. Because if you want to start going into the dynamics of, oh, this person is this and this person is that, then you begin to have some bias. So if there's violence, it's violence against persons, whether you're transgender or you're straight. It doesn't have anything to do with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've gone beyond the time allotted for this session, but I think it's a testament to the reason why we need to have these conversations. And I must commend the participants that have been on the call since we started. I don't know if time will permit us to quickly take the last remarks from the panelists. Short, sweet, straight to the point. If you can have your final remarks in 30 seconds, we'll really appreciate that, please. So we'll start with the way we started. Mrs. Neji, Dr. Kemi, Dr. Akiode, and Ms. Bonola.
Okay, thank you very much, Lola. It's really been a pleasure to be in this program. And this is another means of sensitizing people with respect to the person that asks us the question from the area of sensitization. We have all identified all the issues, and we need to understand that the sustainable solution to this problem and for survivors to have enhanced access to justice requires collective responsibility. Let all of us join our hands together, all the actors and stakeholders should all join hands together for us to be able to ensure that justice is not only seen to be done, but actually secured for the survivors, and for them also at the end of the day to know that all hopes are not lost.
Thank you, ma'am.
Very much.
Thank you so much. Amen. Dr. Kemi.
Very quickly, I think we started with survivors, or at least I did. So I'm going to end with survivors. I couldn't agree more with Mrs. Ineji. We have a collective responsibility. But I will also add that beyond that, we all have an individual role to play within that ecosystem. We all come with different spheres of influence, Lola, from our homes to our workplaces to our social engagements. We need to step out of our comfort zone, start those uncomfortable conversations, ask those uncomfortable questions. When you see something, as DS Verity says, then you say something. We all have a role to play, and it is incumbent upon us. In fact, it's a responsibility that we all become those good, active bystanders that we see. And to all survivors of any form of violence, you are not alone. Every organization on this panel and every individual, lawyers, even those that may not want pro bono services, are here to help you. Please reach out. There are 24-hour helplines. There are centers like the Warrior Center. There are offices like the DSVRT and the feeder offices. Please reach out. You're not alone. Thank you very much. And by the way, I was only teasing about the little comment I made with Kemi, so I hope you're not offended.
Thank you, Doctor. I think Dr. Akiode has dropped off the call, so we just take Kemi, please, on your...
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this panel. Thank you for all that you're doing. Just one last thing I would like to say is the restorative justice is something that strikes me as something that would help a lot in the sphere of domestic violence. I'm not going to go into sexual violence because I feel like that's, individual to the complainant, the victim. So I think restorative justice needs to be encouraged in terms of even a possibility of having some closure. Maybe the perpetrator saying, oh, I'm sorry for what I've done. I know it's a lot, but I know it happens over there, and it's something that we can encourage here. Then maybe to the DSVRT, I don't know if you guys can start a podcast on domestic violence issues. That would be really great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We'll wrap this up now. So on behalf of the Public Interest for Partnership, we say a very, very big thank you to our esteemed panelists for taking time out to share from their wealth of knowledge. We also say a very big thank you to our participants. We hope that you've been informed, you've been enlightened about the various issues that surround sexual and gender-based violence. And as I always say, we are all mandated reporters. If we see something, we should say something, and we should do something. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.